Thanks for being back to my show, Growth Factor. I'm Amalia, and my guest today is my friend Margaret Aranda. She is an MD, so this is Dr. Aranda. Good to see you today. Can you tell us the near-death experience that you had?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. And I really appreciate the opportunity to tell my story. Sometimes a lot of time goes by where I haven't mentioned it to anyone. So it's like reliving it each time. And I appreciate that because it's so spiritually empowering to me. So to give you some context, my daughter and I were in a very severe car accident where we were T-boned at 90 miles an hour, spun in a complete circle, and then jumped over to face oncoming traffic. And the lady that hit us had reached over to grab some food, and she actually broke the rear axle on the tire of a Suburban truck. So it was an extremely hard hit. And unbeknownst to me and everybody else, I had a traumatic brain injury. I had dysautonomia. I felt like I was dying this one day and got rushed to the hospital. I had already been to this hospital about 40 times in a matter of 2 or 3 months, and nobody knew what was wrong with me. So every time I showed up at the emergency room, they didn't know what was wrong with me. They almost literally rolled their eyes at me and just got me out of there as fast as they could. I was fainting every time I stood up. I was severely bedridden. I was losing water, totally dehydrated all the time, and nobody knew why. They didn't know that I had banged my pituitary gland against the ventricle, the bony structure of the brain, and it knocked out my ability to hold on to water, which is not compatible with life. So no matter how much I drank, I would urinate more than what I drank. And eventually I even got to the point where I was in almost kidney failure with no platelets and just covered with bruises. And they still didn't know what was wrong with me. So on this one occasion, about 3 months after the car accident, I was in the emergency room. They rolled their eyes at me again, but this time I don't know why. I guess because I showed up my husband at that time took me there. I showed up basically telling them that I felt like I was about to die. And that's like a weird presentation. Nobody ever says that. And I think they literally took me at my face value and thought that I was going to die in the emergency room. So much to my surprise, they took me upstairs, and I did a lot of ER as a doctor. So I kind of knew what they were supposed to be doing. They rolled me upstairs and put me in a room by myself with no monitors and no nurse. They just left me there alone. The next thing I remembered, there was a priest who walked into the room. He was wearing the black clergy wear with a white collar, and he was carrying a small glass jar that looked like it had oil in it. So he walked over to my bed to the right side of me, and I saw him dip his finger in it. And then I saw that he had dipped his finger in the oil and started raising, he raised his hand to my forehead and he started to make the sign of the cross. I closed my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, I was going down a dark tunnel, and there were people laughing around me, and there were like big bubbles blowing forward down towards this tunnel. And it was as if and it was happy. And like we were going somewhere fun. And then the next thing I knew, there was a gigantic sun in front of me and slightly to my left. And it was God. It was his presence, and he was bounding like a pulsation in a very masculine tone that was like boom, boom, like a heartbeat. But it was extremely loving, no judgment, no sin, no bad things I ever did in my life. I wasn't a bad person. It was as if I was his child, and not only that, I was his favorite child. And there was nobody else in the entire universe but me and him. And I had 100% of his attention. And he loved me just the way I was. And I was floating in a silhouette of myself as if it was a spiritual body. Well, it was. My ankles were dangling towards outer space, like towards the bottom with no tone in them. They were my toes were pointed straight down. And same with my wrists. I didn't have any tone in them. And I remember God's light went and it hit my right leg. And then it went up my body to my head. And I remembered thinking, how did that happen when my left leg is closer to him? And how did that light like bend around my left leg to hit my right leg? And then almost at the same instant, I thought to myself, why am I questioning God? Like I shouldn't be so scientific because he can do anything. So I wasn't in a normal place where normal rules, were beheld. So the other thing that I remember is I had no more tears. I knew 100%, like my body was fully saturated, like underwater, that I would never cry again for the rest of all eternity. I would never shed a tear. I would never be sad. I wouldn't know any sadness. I would only know joy. And anything that ever made me sad in the past would never make me sad again. And I would never have sorrow. In fact, I remember feeling that so distinctly and so thoroughly and so 100% that it saturated my being, like in suspended time almost. It was such a deep feeling. And then I thought at that same second, if only people on earth knew how I felt and what my level of joy was, they would not be crying for me. They would miss me in a human way, but they wouldn't be desperately sad. And they would be happy for me. They would be rejoicing if they just believed, if they knew. So that totally changed the way I felt about death that way, because I know what that feels like. And I feel that kind of joy for people that pass. Then God said to me, without any words, without spoken words, it was ESP. He said, you can go up. I turned slightly to my right because he was off to my left. And there was like the stairway to heaven, just like all the pictures that people see. And I have a picture in a couple of my books, very wide stairway at the bottom, completely white, big handrails on both sides, going up to a smaller and smaller, step. Then there was a gap of space where I could see the stars through there. And then there was a white cloud, big white cloud, bright cloud. So I followed God's directions and I floated to the right side. I didn't need to hold on to the railing. I floated up to the very top step, and then I hesitated. And he said, again by ESP, you can go in. And I was confused because I wasn't sure if I wanted to go in, but I remember that I part of me wanted to go in, so much so that I noticed between the top step and the gap of space. And I was afraid that if I didn't jump up high enough into the cloud, that I would tip and somehow fall all the way into outer space. So I knew that I had to be careful about taking that jump up into the cloud. I hesitated, and then right then I saw my father running towards me inside the cloud. And he was pitched forward with his hands in motion, like he was running as fast as he could. And interestingly, I could also smell his scent. So I knew that it was him. And I knew he was waiting for me. I knew I would have great joy in there, but I wasn't ready. And then I turned to my right and I saw planet Earth far away in the distance. And I asked God, if I go in, will I be able to go back to my daughter? And he said, no, nobody goes in and can go back. Once you go in, you stay there. So I remember feeling very humble, very embarrassed, very ungrateful, because I didn't want to go in. I wasn't ready. I wanted to be with my daughter. She was only 2 years old. And she was like a chatterbox, and she was really beautiful. And like girls and the women in the grocery store would go home to their husbands and decide to have another baby girl. They wanted a girl. So she brought so many people into having, trying one more. I just wasn't ready to leave her. And I wanted to go back to Earth. And I felt at this point, the more I was thinking about going back and forth, and I knew I didn't want to go, but I was ashamed. I was very ashamed, and I started bargaining with God. And I said, can I please go back? Can you just take everything I ever did growing up, all the good things I did that I didn't have to do, and could you add them all up together to make it count, to be good enough to go back to her so I could watch her grow up? And I even brought up a couple examples. My mom left when I was 13, and I had to make like 35 sandwiches every Sunday for 7 kids to go to school. So as a little mom, made my first Thanksgiving dinner when I was 13, ran away from home when I was 16, went to college, tested out of high school, went to college when I was 16, spent nights in jail ward as a doctor with kids that lied about their age so they could be with their grown-ups, made them cry. I lost a lot of sleep, staying up with people to try to talk them into getting out of trouble and getting out of game. And I know that I reduced some of those people that I lectured to absolute tears. And I know that I changed their life, and I know I helped them go in a better direction. So I was bringing all that up to God in his memory. And then I felt even more ashamed, because of course he already knew everything. Like, why was I telling him? So I actually felt like crawling underneath a chair and hiding my shame and hiding myself from that shame. So I remember bending forward and closing my eyes and just kind of wrapping myself up into a little ball of shame. And then I waited for the next thing to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen next. So after a little time went by and nothing happened, I opened my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, the priest was taking his thumb off of my forehead. So I had that entire experience in maybe 15 seconds, 20 seconds, but it felt like half an hour. And I didn't get my healing for another 12 years. I spent in bed looking at the ceiling. I wrote 6 books, but I prayed a lot. I learned how to pray. I lived each day knowing that I could die. And I rose in the morning to the sound of the birds or the sun coming up, and just thanked God that I lived another 12 hours overnight. And then when I woke up, I would ask God to just let me live until the sun went down. And when the sun went down, I would say, just be so grateful. Thank you, God. I lived through another day. I just have to keep doing this over and over and over again, no matter how long it takes. And I said to myself, if I'm going to get up out of this bed, I'm going to get out of this wheelchair, I'm going to get out of this walker, I'm going to get off the cane. And it took 12 years, but I saw myself walking. I saw myself talking. I couldn't even say the word "the" for a long time. I had to go through 6 cycles of speech therapy and watch what she did with her tongue and her lips and everything just to even say the word "the." And I ended up inheriting an entire medical practice, helping a lot of pain patients, one who had already committed suicide. And then over COVID, about 3 years or so, I saw about 2,500 patients and not one single one died. So the only two that died were not mine anymore. They went into the hospital. I yelled and screamed at a couple of doctors for those, but I really was helpless. And two of them reportedly got remdesivir, died in the hospital. So those were only the two hospital-related deaths that I knew of. But I know that God brought me back for a reason. My daughter's now turning 21. She's a nursing assistant in nursing school. She saw her mom get raised from the dead, and she believes in miracles, and I believe in miracles. I am a miracle. And so my message to people, especially those, you and I are in some groups with vaccine injured or long COVID, disabled people, Guillain-Barré, people who have passed away already, children that have died from the vaccine.
So love your story. I've been studying near-death experiences for many years because I was struggling with my own mental health issues. I think it was related to food. I didn't want to be here anymore, but I wasn't going to do anything about it because I have 4 children. So stories like yours are very soothing, very healing. So I appreciate it. Not everyone's willing to share the stories. And that's why I call my show Growth Factor. There's so many ways to grow, so many factors to growth. It's spiritual, it's physical, it's mental. And so right now you're helping us heal spiritually, understanding there is a higher power, call it creator, God, Hashem, whatever name you want to put on it. There is a heavenly realm, and people like you are proving that. Can you tell us anything else about that realm?
I've listened to your show, and I've listened to other people explain their experiences as well. And I understand that some people come back and they still don't know why, like they wanted to stay. So I think my experience was a little bit different that way because I wanted to come back. So, and I feel for those people because my experience was so lovely, and I feel like I have the best of both worlds now, knowing not only what heaven is like where I'm going to go when I die, but also feeling the passion of the plan and the purpose that God put in my life to be able to come back, even though it took 12 years for me to really get a practice. I never prayed for anything more than being able to walk and talk, let alone have an entire medical practice back again as if nothing ever happened. So I just wanted to be of encouragement to those people that don't know why they came back and would have preferred to stay there, that God brought you back for a purpose, and you need to find that purpose and be very careful to speak life into your life and to find that path and that purpose as if you're walking down a hall with a lot of doors open. Just let God open the doors that need to be opened and close the doors that need to be closed. That is my most common prayer. I no longer pray for specific things. I let God have the authority over my life. I died to myself every day and dedicated my life to God. So I'd like to leave people with that because I think it's a win-win that way.
Well, thank you for being here, Dr. Ferrante. We so appreciate you sharing your story. I hope you all follow Dr. Ferrante on her social media, which I'll put below in the description, as well as me, my Twitter. You can look up growthfactor.org or Growth Factor Substack. I also have a Substack. So thank you for being here, and thank you everyone for watching. Dr. Ferrante, there are people that have long COVID. They got damaged from contracting COVID over the past 3 years. There's also people who got the injection who got damaged. Can you explain to us, people who are really suffering, wondering, why am I here? Why did this happen to me? I mean, some of them are my good friends who are police officers, nurses, doctors, mothers and fathers. It's so unfair. I mean, I do get mad at the heavens. I do get mad at the creator. Why would you do this to these good people? So can you tell us, based on your heavenly experience, why is this happening to them, and how do we make it go away?
Okay, so those are both really great questions. And of course, I had a lot of time to think about the answers to those while I was laying in bed looking at the ceiling for 12 years. So why did God allow this to happen? God allowed it to happen so that you could learn from it and so that you could experience it yourself, so that, number one, you can have the experience, and number two, so you know what to say to other people that have the same experience. You know what it feels like to be disabled, to be in pain, to wish you weren't here, to just, you know, have a whole set of experiences that you never would have had, so that you no longer take life for granted, and so that you search God constantly for the answer to why this happened to you. And in doing so, and this is the best way I can put it, you literally have to beg. You have to beg, you have to pray, you have to fast, you have to want it more than anything you've ever wanted. But in doing all of that, you have to put yourself down and surrender yourself to God, so that through his power and through your submission to him, he can recreate you as a new person. And that recreation can include 100% total healing from anything, any vaccine injury. It doesn't even matter if the doctors don't know what it is and you don't have a diagnosis, because God is bigger than all of that. There are many healings in the Bible. There are millions of people that have been healed since, you know, time began. Blind people, if God can heal a blind person and make them see, that's nerve tissue, it's brain tissue, he can do anything. And I hung on that. So what I hung on was visualization, my brain getting better day by day. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote. I was using my brain to write. I hated it. I wanted to throw up every day, and I hated every book that I wrote by the time I was done with it. But I knew that I was exercising my brain, and that's what I felt God wanted me to do. So whether it's crocheting or art or reading or music, find what God wants you to do, the gift that he gave you at birth, because everybody has a gift. Find that gift and start using it. And the more you use it, the better you'll be at it, and the more healing it will be to your insides as well, because you will be creating your new life. So that's what I think. You know, it's an opportunity. And one of the things that I did is I saw myself walk. Okay, I'll tell you the story that I saw. I felt so horrible and so bad for myself. Everybody abandoned me. I lost my family, my house, custody of my daughter. I lost everything that the world holds dear. And I put myself at the bottom of a cold, dark well. I talk about this in my No More Tears book, which is a book that I wrote from this near-death experience. And I would let myself stay there for 72 hours, which to some people is a really long time, but I had nothing but time. So I said, I'm going to wallow for 3 days. And I would be at the bottom of this dark well, crying for 3 days. And then at the end of that time, and it could be 15 minutes for you instead of 3 days for me, I would start crawling like a rock climber, latching onto whatever little pieces were sticking out so I could get out of that well to where I could see the light, and I could see a rod up there or something that I could grab onto so I could get out of the well. And over time, over all those 12 years, I would learn the path to go from, and I would fall back down again and spend another 3 days. And then I would get a little bit higher and higher up. Over time, eventually I got out of the well. And as I got totally close, for me, what I thought was a rod was actually an arm that was reaching out towards me with a hand at the end of it. And all I had to do was get that far, and the hand would grab me and pull me out. And the first time I got out, it was like the sound of music with the big field and the pasture and the butterflies and everything. And it was glorious. And I walked in that beautiful nature for a short time before I fell back down to the bottom of the well again. And this first time I got out, and the first time I ended up back at the bottom of the well, I told myself I was going to get out, and I was never going to go back down again. And so eventually I got back out again. I'm still back out. I have never fallen into that well again, and I will never go back, because I know that what my purpose is, and I know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I have realized the goals that I think God put in front of me. I listen for his spiritual clues. I listen for the direction that he wants me to go in, the instinct or the voice of the Holy Spirit. And I spend my days walking in the Spirit and not walking the way the rest of the world does. Everything is spiritual to me. There is no chance. And if something bad happens to me, I broke my arm. I got pushed down at the dog park by a 90-pound pit bull. I broke my arm. So I started a podcast because I couldn't type anymore. Like, you can't put me down. I will find something to do that God wants me to do, to get a message out in a different way, or to share my story, or to speak life into other people's lives. So never, never, never give up. You have a gift. You have a new gift, a different gift. You have something you didn't know you could do. If you can wiggle your toes, then eventually you'll wiggle your ankles, then you'll wiggle your knees, then you'll get out of bed. So I love that it took me 12 years to be able to say the words that I say, because I did it and I'm still doing it. And I wish there was somebody like me to tell me how to do it, in the first year that it happened. So even though God sent me back, I did not get my full healing for 12 years. And I know that there are other people that have waited 12 years for their miracles too. I don't know what there is about the number 12, or if you've heard of that before either, but I just found out about that today. Yeah. Interesting. So I'm not sure how long, but I just hung in there.
Thank you, Dr. Ferrante. I really appreciate that. The only thing I could add to it is I was in that dark pit too, but I didn't see it as a pit. It was in my diaphragm, in my gut. I felt like a roller coaster all day long. My favorite time of the day was going to bed, putting the covers over my head and kind of hoping I didn't have to wake up the next day. I was having a hard time for almost 2 years, and anxiety most of my life. And the tips I have for you, if you've got a gut and a mind like me, for me, I think it was being vegan, vegetarian. For some of us, that's too much carbs, whether it's lentils, rice, bread, fruits, vegetables, smoothies, salads, all these things hurt people like me. It was too much oxalates, phthalates, lectins, perhaps. That's what a lot of the doctors that I follow say. For some people, they do great with vegan. For my family, I raised my kids vegan, vegetarian. I felt very guilty about meat. I would give them meat once in a while. But for me, it's the red meat, the cow, sheep, goat, the ruminant meat. It's not turkey, chicken, pig, because they're just a different kind of creature. And biblically, Genesis 9, we were given those animals to eat. And as a matter of fact, because they've got the 4 stomachs, the ruminant stomachs, they can eat the remnants. And this is me repeating Professor Dr. Don Layman, who his team brought back eggs. First it was eggs are bad in the 80s, then, just have the white, and now, you can have the whole egg. So Professor Don Layman, if you listen to his interviews, he said, cows can take the leftover, basically crap from the cottonseed industry and eat it and produce beautiful, healthy meat for us to consume. So for me, I needed the heme iron of red meat that plants don't have. I needed the vitamin B12 and all 20 amino acids that the plants either have a little bit or are lacking, or it pulls those ingredients out into the bathroom, into your fecal matter with the fiber. This is what these doctors are saying. So for me, I have to eat red meat. I apologize to the vegans. A lot of them get very upset with what I'm saying. But the last thing I'll say about that is I say to my clients, because I'm a nutritionist, hypnotherapist, my friends and neighbors and family, I say either those animals get sacrificed or my life was going to be sacrificed. So that's my theory on mental and gut health, because I was struggling and one of my children was struggling with IBS. So we healed our mental and gut health by how we eat. And for everyone, I know that's different. So thank you, Dr. Ferrante. Is there anything else you wanted to add about your near-death experience or health in general?
I will say that I totally agree with you that diet is really, sleep and diet, in my opinion, are number 1 and 2. If you don't sleep well, then anybody would be depressed and anxious, and you can't think straight. You get cognitive dysfunction and brain fog, and you just can't do well. So sleep is a big part of getting wellness. Number 2 is diet. Everything you eat is either going to harm you or help you. End of story right there. So yeah, I like to promote the Whole30 diet first. Eat down everything in your house. Don't go to the grocery store. Join the Whole30. They have Facebook groups. It's an anti-inflammatory, antihistamine diet. You can eat as much as you want, and you won't be allergic to anything. And then you slowly add back one food at a time after 30 days to see if you feel better or not. So I like that one as a simple, easy, good thing that there's lots of books on it and a really good support system for that as well. But I love nutrition and sleep. Thank you.
Good tips. I really appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for being here to Growth Factor and Dr. Ferrante and me, Amalya. You can go in the description to find us both. And I hope you share this and hit follow or subscribe. Bye, everyone.